An intern could do this job. That's what Preston, my new manager, a man with the emotional depth of a broken stapler, said out loud in front of my team. My team. 15 years of 5 a.m. login canceled vacations, patching the system through Y2K level meltdowns. And this walking hair gel had the audacity to say I was replaceable by someone whose last major decision was whether to microwave cup noodles with or without the lid. The room went silent. Could hear Becca's acrylic nails clicking against her mug. Julian from finance blinked like he'd just watched someone get run over. I didn't say a word, just nodded, stood up, slid my badge across the table. My chair made this long screeching sound like it too was horrified. If you want to know me better, my link's below. And I walked out. No tears, no tantrum, just that eerie calm you get right before a tornado levels the town. And hey, before we go any further, 97% of y'all listening to this haven't subscribed. That's right. You've been ghosting me like Preston ghosted his own common sense. Smash that follow button and throw a like if corporate dumpster fires light up your soul like mine. It actually keeps this channel alive and our small team caffeinated enough to keep exposing idiocy at scale. All right, let's get back to the chaos. The worst part wasn't even the public execution. It was the look in Preston's eyes. He just conquered something. Like firing me was the start of his victory lap. He turned to the intern sitting next to him, Kimberly, barely out of college, and said, "Let's get you ramped up on Sloan's workflows. Should be straightforward." Kimberly looked like she was about to cry. She'd shadowed me for 2 days and still couldn't figure out which terminal connected to the predictive model fault. Not her fault. It was never meant to be intuitive. It was meant to be impenetrable. Had personally built most of those algorithmic modules during the data infrastructure collapse 5 years back. They weren't even documented anywhere except in my private offline logs. That system was like a feral cat. It only listened to me. But Preston wouldn't know that because Preston didn't ask. He was the kind of manager who printed buzzwords onto slides and thought deleting legacy data pipelines meant deleting the people who wrote them. He wanted modernization, optimization, minimalization. Whatever Asian sounded impressive during his morning mirror pep talks, and I was legacy. By the time I reached the parking lot, my phone buzzed. 6 unread messages in the team group chat. Julian, WTF just happened. Audrey, are we screwed? Kimberly, I'm so sorry. I didn't know he was going to. I turned the phone off, got into my car, an old Bronco with more rust than paint, and just sat there, not crying, just still, my hands resting on the wheel. The kind of stillness that comes when your brain knows something your body hasn't caught up to yet. The storm hadn't hit yet, but I could feel the Austin sky darkening. I'd kept that system alive longer than most of these people had been employed. When the vendor pulled the plug 5 years ago, and the CTO had a full-blown panic attack, it was me who rewrote the algorithm to keep us compliant with federal predictive protocols, who stayed until 3 a.m. doing emergency data syncs no one higher up ever saw. Me who got the quiet call from the CEO personally asking, "Can you keep it alive until we figure this out?" And I had quietly, steadily, like duct tape on a dam. But Preston, he just fired the duct tape, told everyone we didn't need it anymore. So I drove home, taking Mopac, windows down, let the warm Texas wind do that thing where it tangles your hair just enough to make you look like you've been in a wind tunnel. The skyline of the city behind me like a closing chapter. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew one thing. They'd realize the truth soon. Because while Preston was handing my responsibilities to an intern who still used sticky notes for encryption keys, a very real countdown had already started ticking. And once that timer hit 0, well, let's just say the intern was going to need more than a Slack channel and a spreadsheet to keep $240 million in federal data analytics contracts from going up in smoke. The drive home felt like limbo with cup holders. I didn't turn on the radio, just white noise from the road and the occasional wheeze from my AC vents, like even the car was holding its breath. My hand stayed at 10 and 2, like I was afraid if I loosened my grip. It ripped the steering wheel off. 15 years. 15 damn years. I'd been patching that Frankenstein of an algorithmic compliance system since the initial tech boom. Nobody wanted it, nobody understood it, and yet it kept the lights on, kept our contracts clean, kept the feds off our backs. When I first took over the system, it was half-corrupted, undocumented spaghetti code duct taped to an aging server rack in a closet that smelled like stale breakfast tacos and despair. Told me not to bother learning it. We're replacing that soon. That was 2010. The The system outlived 5 department heads, 2 CTOs, and 1 office goldfish. Now Preston, Vanguard Analytics' answer to a tech bro fever dream, fired me in front of my own team because he thought what I did looked repetitive. Sure, just like maintaining a nuclear reactor looks like pushing buttons until someone presses the wrong one. Pulled into my driveway just as the sun dipped behind the hill country. My neighbor was out mowing his lawn like the world hadn't just shifted sideways. I gave a half-hearted wave. He waved back, oblivious. Inside, I kicked off my shoes and opened my laptop. Not the work one. I left that fossil behind. This was my personal machine. My real terminal, the one with copies of everything I was never supposed to take home. But I knew better. It seemed too many unexpected layoffs turned into panicked 2 a.m. phone calls from former bosses begging for undocumented algorithmic fixes. I began the process, backed up all my personal logs, exported my cryptographic renewals, printed my access history from the vault, screenshot the last admin token revocation request. Click, drag, encrypt, repeat. It wasn't vengeance, not yet. It was ritual, like a soldier cleaning their rifle after getting discharged. Might never fire it again, but damn if it won't gleam when the time comes. The thing people never understood about that system. It only worked because I knew where it would break. I didn't just maintain it, I babysat its moods. I knew which error messages were real and which ones were just ghosts from a deprecated data pipeline. The system talked to me in code and timing, in corrupted logs and subtle misfires. It was ugly and ungrateful, but it was mine. At 9:17 p.m., my phone lit up a known number, but I recognized the area code, Corporate HQ. I let it ring out. Seconds later, a voicemail came through. I pressed play on speaker while pouring myself a bourbon. "Hi Sloan, this is Victoria. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Wells. He asked me to check in regarding an unexpected departure earlier today. He wasn't informed beforehand. He's asked if you could give him a call back directly when you have a moment." The tone was polite. The undertone was, we might have just made a very expensive mistake. I set the phone down untouched. Unexpected, huh? I sipped my drink, let the oak burn settle behind my ribs. I knew what that system would do when my admin tokens timed out. 36 hours from my last login, it would enter uncustodied state. A protocol I personally wrote after the 2018 data breach would start rejecting cryptographic key sync requests, red flag the compliance logs, suspend the predictive audit trail, and once that happened, the feds would have to step in because by definition, the system would no longer be legally supervised, which meant every government data transaction, even if harmless, would become suspect. They hadn't just fired the admin, they fired the cryptographic signature. I leaned back, eyes on the ceiling, bourbon in hand, while the soft hum of my backup drive whispered its quiet goodbye. The wheel was turning now, and nothing was stopping it. First thing Monday, Preston strutted in like he just won a promotion no one offered him. Fresh haircut, too much cologne, and a smug little pep in his step like firing me had somehow cleansed the building of inefficiency. "All right, team," he said, clapping his hands in the break room like a kindergarten teacher on a sugar crash. "Kimberly and Wyatt will be dividing up Sloan's documentation workflows. It'd be too hard, just routine admin stuff." Audrey looked like she was going to choke on her overnight oats. Wyatt, the junior engineer who still called Jupyter Notebooks that black screen, visibly paled. He opened a browser and typed Legacy Algorithmic Sloan Doc site into the search bar. Nothing came up because I never made a public site because that system wasn't supposed to be public. Kimberly, bless her heart, was already hunched over her borrowed workstation, clicking through a GUI she didn't recognize, her forehead visibly sweating. There's an error here. It says, Citadel 41 token expired, custodian undefined, and then it crashed. Preston didn't even flinch. That's just legacy noise. It'll sort it out. Keep pushing. Legacy noise. That's what he called the architecture I'd basically resurrected from a digital corpse with nothing but half-broken vendor notes and a terminal window. Legacy noise like it was a fax machine left on overnight. Thing is, that noise had teeth. Citadel 41 didn't crash. It shut the door. It only gave that error when the admin cryptographic signature went unmatched during a routine algorithmic sync. And it only did that when someone like me, someone who wrote that part of the failsafe, revoked their own credentials manually, which I had done. At exactly 8:43 a.m. at home, I logged into my secure offline backup console one last time, clicked the big red button labeled Revoke Admin Token, Sloan Vance. It prompted me with a warning. Warning, custodian token removal will initiate predictive audit lockdown within 36 hours if no replacement is assigned and verified. I clicked yes. The screen flashed, then went dark. There it was, the silent kill switch. The system would still look operational from the outside for now. It would accept inputs, it would let you poke around, but deep inside, the algorithmic verification thread had just entered a loop. A countdown, waiting, ticking. The junior engineer Wyatt, meanwhile, was Googling what custodian undefined meant. I imagined him on Reddit by lunchtime, posting something like, "Help algorithmic compliance software throwing weird errors. Boss says ignore. Should I be worried?" Oh, honey. Preston called a meeting at 2 p.m. to check in on transition progress. He sat at the head of the table, grinning like a man who thinks Tableau dashboards are foreplay. So he asked, "Smooth sailing?" Kimberly held up her notepad. It was blank except for a post-it that read "asked about 3 FA token" with 3 underlines. She looked like she'd aged 5 years since breakfast. "Kimberly," he said again, voice dripping with condescension. She mumbled, "I can't get access to the Citadel. The terminal keeps rejecting my encryption keys. Did you submit the role reassignment through Access Point?" Preston asked, "Yes, but it says my role lacks historical signature parity. I don't know what that means." Preston rolled his eyes so hard I swear he sprained something. God, Sloan really overcomplicated everything. "Will escalate to IT." "Shouldn't legal be notified?" Audrey asked softly. He laughed. "Legal doesn't need to know about error messages." He was wrong. So wrong, because Citadel 41 didn't care about titles. Didn't care if you were VP of whatever or a senior executive synergy strategist. It cared about one thing, that the cryptographic signature tied to the federal predictive logs matched the one the government had on record. And that signature, mine, no signature, no verification. No verification, no algorithmic compliance. No compliance, no data contracts. And while Preston passed around blame like it was leftover birthday cake, I was sitting on my back porch sipping a cup of tea, watching the Texas sun go down. Inside, my personal console pinged once. A single line, custodian status, revoked countdown to lockdown. 33 hours, 12 minutes, 7 seconds, let them keep pushing buttons. The shell looked fine on the outside, but it was already hollow and it was about to collapse. The first ripple hit at 7:42 a.m. on Tuesday when the CTO Chadsworth, usually unflappable man who spoke in acronyms and kept stress balls shaped like servers, got an automated alert from the predictive bridge server, sync anomaly detected. Audit logs not verified with federal algorithmic registry for 23 hours. That may sound like tech fluff to most folks, but in our world, that message is the equivalent of a check engine light flashing while the hood is on fire. You don't ignore it, you don't circle back. You stop everything and pray the next email isn't from the feds. T.O. Chadsworth blinked at the screen, scrolled, then blinked again. His fingers hovered over the keyboard like they weren't sure whether to forward the alert or delete it and flee the country. He clicked through the error tree and found the source. Citadel 41, my system. The data log stopped syncing the moment my token was revoked. He opened a trace report. The architecture still existed. It was rejecting sync commands from every backup daemon and proxy node assigned after Friday. One line kept repeating, "Custodian notified, signature rejected." And then, like a cherry on the panic sundae, he found my name still listed on every active data filing. My digital signature time-stamped on the last verified compliance upload. No replacement custodian filed, no transition approved, nothing. Meanwhile, down in legal, Victoria. Yes. Same Victoria who called me on behalf of Mr. Wells was sipping her morning espresso and scanning the automated predictive digest when she frowned. Scrolling through the filings, she paused on Form 722B, quarterly algorithmic chain confirmation filed under Sloan Vance. Next due today, backup custodian none risk flag high. Her spoon clinked against the porcelain. She picked up the phone and dialed Preston. "Hey, looking at the quarterly analytics filings," she said voice level. "Has Sloan's custodial handover been finalized?" "Huh?" Preston was mid-coffee slurp. "Oh, that, yeah. Kimberly's picking it up. She's got it covered. Sloane's stuff was just old admin procedures. Victoria paused. You assigned Kimberly? Yes. Look, don't worry, we're modernizing. I've got a system-wide simplification plan coming next quarter. That's not what I asked. I'm telling you, I've got it under control. Chadsworth burst into Preston's office 6 minutes later. No knock, just stormed in, laptop in hand, open to the audit trace screen. Tell me you've got Sloane's handover logged with the algorithmic registry. Preston, flustered, waved him off. It's just being dramatic. Chadsworth pointed at the screen. We're not syncing. The federal system has rejected our last 3 predictive uploads. If this keeps up, they'll shut down our ability to process data under Section 932. All right, calm down. I'll get Kimberly to fix the data pipelines. Chadsworth leaned in cold and quiet. This has nothing to do with data pipelines. This is about federal cryptographic authorization. You fired the only person legally cleared to touch that system. Preston looked like a man trying to lie with his face, but realizing he left his poker face in his other suit. She was a middle-tier admin. Anyone can do that job. Chadsworth didn't even blink. Explain to legal why her name is still on every active record. Silence. At that exact moment, across Austin, I was sitting at my kitchen table in sweatpants, eating dry cereal straight from the box, watching the little loading spinner on my laptop. It was almost poetic. I opened a draft email. The recipient field was already filled in. mreed@fedoversight.gov. Marcus Reed, my contact at the Federal Oversight Office. We'd worked together for years. Once sent me a gift of a miniature Longhorn with a briefcase when I caught a data processing error before his office did. That's how close we were. I typed one sentence. Per our custodial protocol, please see the attached transition void for your records. Attached was a single PDF, a formal confirmation that the predictive custodian role had been vacated due to employment termination with no assigned replacement. Time-stamped, digitally signed, irrevocable. I hit send. That was it. No drama, no threats, no lawyers, just a trigger. One bullet in the chamber. Back at Vanguard Analytics, legal and algorithmic compliance started to do what lawyers and risk teams do best. Panic behind closed doors while pretending everything was fine. The warning flags were stacking up. A cascade of failed syncs. A series of rejected timestamps. A dead custodian field. No fail-safe override. But Preston, he was still sipping his coffee, blissfully unaware that his empire was built on quicksand and the tide was rolling in. By nightfall, I got a delivery confirmation from Marcus's office, read at 4:36 p.m. 3 words, no response, but I didn't need one. The system had started counting, and soon it would stop. By Wednesday morning, the building didn't hum. It creaked like the whole place had developed a nervous tic. People were walking faster, talking quieter. Phones rang a little longer before being answered. You could practically hear the servers sweating through the walls. The system wasn't down, not yet. But it had started whispering its warnings loud enough that even the clueless could tell something was wrong. First came the data invoice failures. Procurement tried to process a standard bulk renewal for secure algorithmic transport services. Feds require quarterly certification, nothing fancy. The system flagged it as unauthorized custodian signature, null. It bounced 3 times before the internal ledger locked it into review status. $1.4 million frozen in digital purgatory. Then came the emails, one from the Department of Energy's Predictive Oversight Team. Please confirm current compliance officer on file. Recent activity logs show unsigned data transfers. Another from the Office of Algorithmic Management. We are unable to verify the authenticity of your Q3 analytics filing. Has your point of contact changed? Legal started getting jumpy. Finance started twitching, and Kimberly, the poor intern turned sacrificial lamb, was now working 12-hour days trying to keep up with ghost models she didn't even know existed last week. Meanwhile, Preston slapped on his fake calm voice and told everyone it was just residual noise from deprecated legacy integrations. That phrase became his mantra. He repeated it in meetings like it was sage wisdom. Even as things spiraled when the CTO Chadsworth mentioned failed algorithmic integrity checks on archive data bundles, Preston said, "We're modernizing. Some glitches are expected during reorgs." When legal said that unsigned audits might trigger a mandatory federal investigation, waved a hand and muttered, "I've got calls scheduled, but the calls weren't helping because no one, not Kimberly, not Wyatt, not IT, had access to the compliance core. Citadel 41 was sealed. The system had entered its defensive posture, and the red tape wrapped tighter with every failed attempt to brute force a solution. I didn't hear any of this firsthand. I didn't have to. Julian from finance texted me around noon. Hey, not to pry, but did Preston mess something up? People are freaking. Audrey DM'd me on Signal a few hours later. Sloan, something's wrong. Your system won't open for anyone. Preston said you left it oversecured, but that doesn't sound right. Did you do something? No, Audrey. I didn't do something. I did everything. I followed protocol. I played by the rules. I just knew the rules better than the fools trying to replace me. From my couch wrapped in a blanket I crocheted during the pandemic, I scrolled through the quiet unraveling like it was a soap opera I'd already watched but still enjoyed. I wasn't gloating. This wasn't about vengeance. It was peace. The kind of peace that comes when your truth doesn't need explaining anymore. I sipped tea while the world I'd held together with zip ties and grit started to wheeze and wobble without me. That architecture was old, fragile, not because it was weak, because it had been running for years on institutional memory and sheer willpower. My memory, my willpower. Preston never asked what I did, never wondered why a middle-tier admin got CCD on internal memos between legal and predictive compliance, why I had clearance levels 3 tiers above his, why the data pipelines only ever worked when I was around. And now, even the building could tell something was off. I imagined the elevator sighing, the printers blinking out SOS messages, air smelling faintly of ozone and bad decisions. The shutdown wasn't here yet, but it was close enough that the floor had started to feel it, like the first wind before a hurricane. Whispers through the cracks, papers fluttering, all eyes pretending not to look at the sky. It was 7:46 p.m. when Preston's phone rang. He was halfway through a mediocre takeout pad thai, sitting on his couch in socks and a t-shirt that said "Hustle Harder," watching a startup pitch show he didn't understand but pretended to love. The ringtone jolted him. It was his work line. He groaned and flipped it over. Procurement int, he paused. Answered Preston here. Preston, this is Patricia from procurement, the voice snapped. No pleasantries. Why are all our federal algorithmic transactions frozen? He blinked, chewing. I'm sorry. What? I've got 5 flagged orders. All government-facing stuck in authorization review. System won't accept new transactions until previous analytics logs are verified, which, by the way, haven't updated since Monday morning. Preston stood up. That doesn't make sense. We submitted the data logs. It must be IT's, not IT. Patricia cut in. I checked with them already. Citadel 41 is rejecting every input. We can't even view the audit trails. Okay, calm down. It's probably a permissions issue. I'll just pull the data myself. Hung up before she could reply. Already logging into the compliance console from his work laptop. Greasy fingers dancing over the trackpad. Access denied. Authority token invalid. Error code. SIG chain mismatch. He frowned. Tried again. Same screen. His access level, still technically director, wasn't enough to get into the audit trail system because that system had a custodian gate, one tied to a very specific set of credentials. Mine dug through the transition folder he told Kimberly to sort through later. Most of it was empty. The only thing of note, a spreadsheet titled Sloan Transition Tasks with 4 cells populated and 1 big red comment box that read pending approval. Citadel access not delegated. He called I need emergency access to Citadel 41. The night tech Mateo we've been trying since Monday. Citadel's not recognizing any of the backup cryptographic tokens about system override. Mateo hesitated. Sloan disabled that 2 years ago after the algorithm patch with legal sign-off. Preston's face flushed. What do you mean she disabled override? I mean she rewrote the fallback logic. We only have 1 custodian slot now. It was part of the predictive compliance hardening update. Don't you remember the audit from 2022? She gave a whole presentation. You were CCD. Preston didn't answer. He was already sweating. Mateo added, unless you get Sloan to manually reassign the key, the system's going to go into full algorithmic lock mode at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Preston hung up for the first time since Friday. He felt real fear, not just annoyance or irritation, but bone-deep, oh God, this is actually happening fear. He opened Outlook, scrolled past a dozen internal threads, mostly people asking if something was broken. Then he clicked new email. sloanvance@personnelmail.com subject. Urgent. Sloan, please confirm. Did you officially leave the company? There seems to be a situation developing with the predictive compliance systems. We would really appreciate your help resolving a few items." He hovered, then hit send. A few miles away, I was sitting in my kitchen with a glass of red wine and the last slice of leftover lasagna. Candle burning. The kind of quiet evening that feels like a reward instead of a pause. My laptop pinged with a new message. I saw the subject line and didn't even open it. Then came a second ping from Wells, CEO at Vanguard Analytics. Subject: urgent. Did you leave? Just that 5 words. No greeting, no sign off. I stared at the screen for a long moment, wine glass halfway to my lips. He knew, or was beginning to, but I didn't reply because I didn't need to. The data transfer was never made. The system was holding the line. At exactly 9 a.m. tomorrow, that line would snap. Thursday, 8:59 a.m. The morning meeting in Conference B was already tense. People filed in like they were walking into a courtroom. Kimberly clutched a lukewarm houndstooth coffee with both hands like it might protect her. Audrey didn't speak at all, just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Even Julian from finance had stopped trying to make nervous jokes. Preston sat at the head of the table in a tailored navy blazer he probably thought screamed authority. He shuffled papers, cleared his throat twice, and opened his laptop as if pretending to be busy might stop the walls from collapsing. He was in the middle of some line about stabilizing algorithmic operations by end of week when the glass doors slammed open. Not pushed, slapped open with the kind of force that made the whole room flinch. In stormed Wells, the CEO, red-faced, breathing hard like he jogged the stairs instead of taking the elevator. He wasn't carrying a laptop or a coffee or even a phone, just a single thick blue folder clutched in one hand. White-knuckled, he stopped dead center at the table, looked at no one in particular and bellowed, "Where is she?" No one moved. It was like a horror movie jump scare without the music. Preston stood halfway. "Mr. Wells, I assume you're referring to Sloan," Wells growled. "I'm referring to Sloan. Where is she?" Preston glanced at Kimberly, then back at Wells. She was part of the restructuring initiative. "We've since redistributed her algorithmic tasks," to Wells, slammed the folder onto the table. People jumped. The folder burst open just enough for the top page to slide out, marked with a fat red header. "Notice of Federal Data Analytics Contract Suspension System Integrity Unverified." Audrey gasped. Kimberly dropped her coffee. Wells turned slowly toward Preston, voice low now. Razor sharp, restructured, the only person on staff certified to maintain our predictive compliance system. The one who, personally built the model that kept our $240 million in contracts from collapsing. Preston tried to recover. There was an assumption that the system had transitioned. We assigned a team. Assumed. Wells snapped. "Do you assume your parachute works before you jump out the damn plane, Preston?" The room was dead silent. Julian, God bless him, whispered under his breath, "Jesus." Wells turned back to the table and pointed to the second page. Effective immediately. All federal algorithmic transactions are frozen. All data processing workflows have been red flagged. And we are officially under preliminary investigation for failure to maintain predictive custodial oversight under Federal Statute 932. Kimberly looked like she might cry. Audrey looked like she wanted to run. Preston cleared his throat and reached for his laptop. "Can fix this? We'll reach out. Have Sloan reauthorize access. She's under no obligation." Wells cut him off. "You fired her. You revoked her clearance. You removed the cryptographic signature without a replacement in place. She followed protocol. You didn't." Someone at the far end of the table whispered, "Wait, she was the actual predictive custodian of record." Wells turned and barked. "Of course, she was. Why the hell do you think she had higher algorithmic clearance than me on Citadel 41? 'Cause she was handpicked by me to hold that architecture together after the data vendor collapsed. She was the keystone." Preston finally sat down. No more spinning, no more buzzwords, just a man slowly realizing he'd pulled the wrong thread and now the entire quilt was unraveling in front of everyone. "Sir," he tried softer now, "I didn't know." Wells didn't look at him, he just shook his head once. "You didn't ask." and then he turned and left the room. Not a word more, not a plan, not a promise. Just stormed out the same way he came, leaving silence behind so thick it felt like the oxygen had been turned off. Back at home, I was on my second cup of coffee. Same hoodie, same quiet kitchen, news on low in the background, inbox clean, phone screen lit up again with a single line text from a number I hadn't saved. Please, just tell me how to stop this. I didn't respond because by now they weren't asking for help. We're asking for a miracle, and miracles weren't part of my job description anymore. The boardroom that afternoon felt less like a meeting and more like a funeral, except no one had the decency to bring flowers. Preston sat at the far end of the table, collar undone, eyes darting like a trapped animal trying to find an exit that didn't exist. The legal team was huddled in silence, laptops open but untouched. Predictive Compliance had printed every page of the suspension notice and laid them out like evidence in a trial. Wells stood at the head of the table, hands flat, face drained. His voice, when it finally broke the silence, was a low, dangerous calm. "Preston," he said, "do you even know what her job actually was?" Preston blinked, opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. She managed data ops reporting internal workflows, legacy documentation procedures. I thought, no? And Wells interrupted, shaking his head slowly. She was the only federally certified data custodian for our algorithmic compliance infrastructure. The only one. You fired the signature. You didn't just fire an employee, you erased our legal right to process federal data. Someone on the legal team whispered, "Jesus Christ." Wells kept going, voice rising only slightly. Sloan was vetted by the Office of Algorithmic Integrity. She passed level Roman 3 clearance when our infrastructure collapsed, and no third party could take over the predictive models. I was there when she rewrote the compliance bridge from scratch, using obsolete datasets no one else would touch. You know why we never replaced her? Preston looked up slowly, eyes wide. Because we couldn't. Wells slammed a manila folder down in front of him. Sloan's algorithmic clearance profile sealed with a federal stamp. This wasn't just an HR file. This was a national security data contract. And you signed the offboarding form like you were tossing out expired printer toner. Preston stared at the document like it might bite him. He looked pale, smaller somehow. "I didn't know," he whispered. "That's the got him problem," Wells shot back. "You didn't know. You didn't ask. You assumed. You thought she was just another quiet worker bee pushing buttons while you strutted around babbling about streamlining data models." Preston tried to stand. "We can fix it. Call her. Offer her a reinstatement. It's already been reported," snapped Victoria from legal. Her predictive custodian role was marked vacated and confirmed by the Federal Oversight Office at 4:36 p.m. Tuesday. She filed it clean, precise, by the book. And because we had no backup data custodian, added the CTO Chadsworth, who hadn't spoken all day, the system interpreted her departure as algorithmic abandonment. The predictive audit lock is automated. Citadel 41 began countdown the moment her encryption key hit revocation. Wells stared at the ceiling for a beat. "So what you're telling me is we're done, unless she comes back voluntarily," Victoria said, and signs a new cryptographic agreement. "Yes." "Can't we push a reinstatement form?" Preston asked, voice cracking. "It won't matter," Chadsworth replied, "not without her physical presence. She built biometric tie-ins, facial algorithmic signature, keystroke behavior. The system knows it's her. Can't fake that." Christ, no one corrected him. Wells rubbed his face and turned to Victoria. "Do we have a number for her?" She didn't answer our last 3 calls or emails or the courier we sent yesterday. I doubt she's going to change her mind. Wells nodded once, slowly, like a man marking the spot where the ship hit the iceberg. He looked across the table again, past legal, past IT, straight at Preston. "I gave you the keys to a data vault you didn't understand. Instead of learning what it was, you set it on fire." Preston looked down at his hands. "I thought she wasn't visible. I didn't think she mattered." "Sometimes," Wells said, voice like a door closing. "The quiet ones are the only thing holding the algorithmic roof up." No one spoke after that. Back at home, I was reading a book. Not a legal manual, not a technical doc, a novel, fiction, something with no acronyms. My phone vibrated once, a new voicemail from an unknown number. It's Sit. I'd already done my job, and no one, not Preston, not the board, not even Wells, could undo what had already been triggered. The data contract was void. The algorithmic clock had run out. The roof had started to collapse. Thursday, 9 a.m. sharp. No alarms, no sirens, no dramatic countdowns like in the movies, just a single line of red text that blinked into existence on every monitor across 3 floors of the analytics wing. Quiet. Clinical cryptographic authorization lock. Predictive custodian role vacated. All data contract-related models suspended per federal algorithm compliance protocol. And just like that, $240 million in active government analytics contracts flatlined. Finance data terminals froze mid-upload. Procurement predictive dashboards grayed out. The audit console stopped responding altogether, showing nothing but that red line like a digital death certificate signed in code. HR tried to force a payroll release and got slapped with a hard rejection tagged algorithmic compliance chain invalid. Preston was nowhere to be found. Wells, already in the war room with legal, the CTO Chadsworth, and 3 red-eyed execs who hadn't slept, watched the red message appear on the big screen. No one said a word. The weight of it landed like a body. Then came the emails. One from the Department of Defense, effective immediately. A firm is placed on administrative hold pending full predictive custodial reassessment. Another from the Federal Office of Algorithmic Logistics. We are initiating a third-party review of data contract eligibility in accordance with Clause 7 to 9b. Please cease all analytics work until further notice. Even the janitorial vendor contract triggered a data red flag. Wells sat perfectly still, then leaned toward Victoria Legal and whispered, "Do we still have a shot at getting her back?" Victoria didn't look up from the screen. She's under no obligation now. The moment we submitted the offboarding, she became a civilian again, and she finally turned to face him. She was our algorithmic compliance officer of record. That's what the feds are seeing right now. Her name, no replacement. Silence settled like ash. At 9:07 a.m., Kimberly stood from her desk and walked into the hallway. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, just leaned against the wall and stared at the floor like it might offer answers. IT began pulling data logs. Finance began drafting loss estimates. PR sent out a scheduled predictive system maintenance tweet no one believed. Someone in legal muttered, "We're going to get sued into the algorithmic afterlife." But Wells, he just stared at the screen, at that blinking red banner, at the ghost of the woman he trusted, the one he never should have let HR touch. Across Austin, a quiet cafe with black tile floors and too many Edison bulbs. I sat near the window reading, just a paperback thriller I'd picked up from the used bookstore. A croissant half-eaten, houndstooth coffee cooling beside me. My phone buzzed once on the table. I glanced down. Unfamiliar number, no message, then another buzz, then a third. I didn't need to check. I already knew. They were calling because they finally understood. Not out of respect, not even regret. Just fear. Fear of the predictive models I'd held together. Fear of the silence I left behind. I picked up the phone, let it vibrate in my palm a second longer, then pressed and held the power button. Screen went black. In that moment, it wasn't revenge. It wasn't bitterness. It was something simpler, closure, because I didn't burn the bridge. I just let them walk off it and watched from a distance as the algorithmic structure they thought didn't need me collapsed under its own arrogance. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.